Are you physically okay, but suffering from COVID in your mind? If you think the answer might be yes, I'm going to help you today. I'm going to offer you a couple of tips you can apply to your life. And what I want you to think about during this presentation is, how am I possibly making COVID worse than it needs to be? My name is Gina Covarrubias, and I'm an engineering life coach. The name of my company is deliberatedoing.com. I'm going to go ahead and share my slides with you so we can get started. And the name of this presentation today is COVID-19, physically okay, mentally infected. The question I want you to answer at the end of the presentation is, do I suffer from COVID in my mind? So I'm going to help you figure that out today. After a brief introduction, in sections 2, 3, and 4, I'm going to offer one tip for you to think about and apply to your life, and we'll wrap it all up with the final conclusion. Let's get started with the introduction. Do I suffer from COVID in my mind? So many people in our society right now are reacting. There's a lot of conjecture, there's a lot of opinions going on around us. There's a lot of medical unknowns. There's a lot of disagreement among friends and family. There's a lot of political disagreements out there. All of these things are adding up, and people are feeling discontent and panic and chaos and rage and all of these other things that I have written there, and probably more. So about me, the reason I'm doing this today is because I'm noticing in many people I talk to and in many of my clients, there's a lot of panic still. There's a lot of unknown about COVID. So my goal today is to help you get a little bit more of a grip on things and maybe not be as stressed as you currently are. As a life coach, you can see at the bottom, I create an unbiased dialogue with my clients to help them overcome emotional issues and problems. And at the end of the process, what I end up doing is I end up strengthening people's mental well-being. So essentially, what I like to say about myself as a life coach is that I'm like a personal trainer for the mind. Moving on, section 2. We're going to talk about facts versus fiction. So let's start at the top here. This might apply to you. You might be furious because others don't comply with your own beliefs. You might feel really helpless because you can't control COVID and what it's going to do next. So the main takeaway of this slide is here in the middle. Are you feeding yourself subjective stories or objective facts? And let's take a look at each one and what they mean. On the left, starting with number 1, we call this your subjective narrative. In other words, it's opinionated. So many people think COVID is dangerous. Many people might think COVID is very, very dangerous. And there are people who think COVID really isn't that dangerous. So this is the narrative that many people choose to believe up here in their minds, which is fine unless it causes you a lot of anxiety and stress. So let's look at number 1 on the right. The fact of the matter is that COVID is a flu strain. That is something everybody can agree on. But what we can't agree on is how dangerous it is and to whom. So I want you to be very careful when you tell yourself COVID is very dangerous or COVID is not very dangerous. Is that helping you in your life? I want you to think about that. Number 2, masks protect people. Masks do not protect people. We all have our own opinions about masks. But what is actually true? Let's focus on the fact here. Look at the right. Number 2, there is no medically universal agreement on the effects of masks. So I want you to think about that. When you think about whether or not people should be wearing masks and whether or not you should be, the fact of the matter is that nobody knows. Number 3, you might be a person who says to yourself, some people are not taking this seriously. What I want you to understand is to look at number 3 on the right. That is the fact of the matter. The fact is that everybody's entitled to their own opinion. Let's look at number 4. Some of you believe I shouldn't be forced to wear a mask, and it causes you additional anxiety or stress, and you like to talk to your friends and family about how you're being forced to wear a mask. Okay, let's take a step back and look at the fact of the matter. The fact is some places are requiring it and some places are not. That is the fact. On the left at the bottom, what I've written here is that these are examples of subjective opinions that you may believe to be actually true. But on the right, those are restated as the objective fact. So if you have some of those beliefs on the left, I want you to, again, take a step back and just ask yourself, are these beliefs helping me? Are they hurting me? And also take a look at the facts on the right. So you think you know some of the answers, and you think you know what you believe to be true, and like a video recording in our minds, you go over this and you repeat it, and you talk to your friends and family about these things that you truly believe. And I want you to stop and think what this slide is saying here at the bottom. Your opinions mixed with the facts could be making matters worse for yourself. So tip number 1 today, try to separate the narrative you're telling yourself from the actual proven facts. This one step in and of itself, if you know how to do this, could be a game changer for you. Let's move on to section 3, the control factor. So a lot of us want the things listed here on the top. We want certainty in our lives. We want to get back to normal. We want COVID to go away, or we want others to act differently and take more precaution. We want politicians to do their thing. So below this is very important what I've written here. The more you wish to control these things, the more you want to change the way things are, the more pain you're causing yourself, because what you're doing is denying reality. You're rejecting what is. That is a very exhausting battle that you will not win. So this is a very big takeaway, these bottom 2 sentences. When you deny reality and when you reject what is, you are fighting a losing battle, and it's very exhausting. You do, however, get to control your thoughts and your own belief systems. And what I want you to think about on this slide is to redirect your energy away from the externals and away from the circumstances around you, and focus your energy onto yourself. And I've given a few examples here of how you can do that. On the left, some of us have externally focused thoughts. Schools should be doing that. Politicians are wrong because of. The news media only focuses on this. What if COVID blank? What if COVID comes back stronger in the fall? What if COVID never goes away? So stop and think about if you are externally focused in your thinking. And I would challenge you to instead focus inwardly, focus on yourself. Starting at the top here, I will take my own precautions by doing such and such. I may be right, I may be wrong, but I'm choosing to believe blank. Instead of focusing on what the media is focusing on, why don't you focus on what you want to think about? And instead of saying to yourself, what if COVID does this or that, never goes away, blah, 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 whatever. Why don't you focus on yourself? What if I blank? What if I get to take the precautions that I want to take? How am I going to create goals and reach those goals for myself, despite circumstances? So on the left, those are a few examples of some painful and exhausting beliefs that some of us tell ourselves. And on the right are empowering beliefs in which you control when you focus on yourself. So tip number 2 from this slide is written at the bottom. Stop and think about how are your beliefs, once you separate them from the narrative, how are your own beliefs either helping or hurting your well-being? And moving on to the next section, Obstacles. We all have obstacles in our lives, right? Starting at the top here, it's easy to blame COVID for some of our problems. Some of you have lost a job. Some of you feel stuck in your job. You're fighting with your family at home because you can't get out and you feel isolated. Some of you had to cancel your vacations. A lot of you are fighting about political issues. And those of you who are working from home, instead of working in the office, feel like you're working too much. So this is just a list of examples of how COVID has created some obstacles in our lives. And at the bottom here, I've only listed a few, but these are a lot of negative emotions that are coming up for a lot of people when they think about all the obstacles that COVID has presented in their lives. Let's take it one step further. A lot of these feelings that many of us have already existed prior to COVID. So that's very important, because we were going about our lives and there may have been a little bit of stress, a little bit of anxiety, maybe there was a lot. All of a sudden, COVID comes into our lives. COVID creates obstacles for us. Obstacles amplify our existing insecurities and they bring to the surface feelings that were already there. And obstacles force us to improvise. They throw challenges our way that we're not necessarily ready for, nor do we want. The big takeaway from this slide is that COVID is not the root of the problem. And that might be difficult for you to wrap your mind around, but COVID brought existing feelings to the surface, and now you're being forced to deal with them. So the last part about obstacles. Obstacles are forcing us outside of our comfort zones. That doesn't mean anything has gone wrong. So if you're telling yourself, my life is horrible, this shouldn't be happening, things are not going according to plan, you're causing yourself extra pain. What I want you to try to understand is that nothing has gone wrong here. So on the left are all those lists of obstacles, and all of us have our own. And on the right, what I'm telling you here, the solution is, what you should do is try to adapt. And adapt your brain to the circumstances around you instead of trying to adapt your circumstances to your brain. So in other words, your same way of thinking is going to follow you throughout the rest of your life, whether COVID is here or not. It's a very, very big takeaway I want you to remember. Unless you strengthen your mental well-being, your same line of thinking is going to keep following you, whether COVID is here or not. Here's my conclusion slide. Let's wrap all of this up. This is a lot of information. I repeated what I just said at the top of this slide because it's very well worth you thinking about. Try adapting your brain to the world instead of trying to adapt the world to your brain. The orange equation here sums up what I've talked about today. When you combine your biased narrative that you tell yourself in your mind with the fact that some of you want to try to control things, with the fact that we have new obstacles in our lives that we're trying to deal with, you may be mentally infected with COVID. And what that means is you might be making matters much worse than they really need to be. So, underneath the equation, what I've written here, obstacles are necessary for human advancement. And please don't get me wrong, I'm not stating COVID is a good thing. What I'm stating is that we are being bombarded with new obstacles and challenges in our lives. That's what makes us grow, evolve, and get stronger. Nothing has gone wrong here. Stop resisting what is and try adapting to the world around you. Now let's revisit the question I posed to you at the beginning. Do I suffer from COVID in my mind? Number one, identify your narrative and separate it from the facts. Number two, try to identify how your narrative up here could be making COVID worse in your life. If you have issues with that, if you don't really know if you're doing it properly, my business email is here at the bottom. Please send me any questions that you have. I'm happy to hear your feedback. If you want to bounce ideas off of me, I'm here. And the last thing I'd like to say is thank you for watching. By embracing this information in my presentation, you have fed your brain some great mental nutrition today. You've gained some self-awareness. You've learned how to expand your thinking. And you've learned how you can mitigate some COVID effects in your life. And you may not be able to do it overnight, but if you start practicing today and if you watch this video a few times, you're going to start to understand how you might be making things a little bit worse for yourself. Again, there's my business email, gina@deliberatedoing.com. If you would like additional training, I have a video series on my website. It's called Fundamental Skills for an Efficient Life, and it's basically an introduction to life coaching, and it walks you through steps on how you can mentally strengthen your mind. The last thing I'd like to say is thank you so much to all the wonderful medical staff and support and everybody in the medical field who is keeping us safe. Thank you so much. Please don't hesitate to send me any questions, and I look forward to seeing you again. Thank you. Bye-bye.